The Touhou Project, the colorful, arduous, and admittedly rather painful bullet hell series is everywhere, whether you like it or not. I mean, really, throughout the 25+ year history this project has to offer, you could find countless references to the series in the most unexpected corners of the internet. And you don't even have to take my word for it. Upon doing research for other topics, I came across this page in the Touhou wiki listing dozens of known references to the project. As of the making of this video, there are a whopping 72 entries on this list, with countless more still being added to this day. So I think it's fair to say that the impact this project had on the internet is pretty big to say the least. But what if we flip the script? Instead of chasing down Touhou's influence on the world, why don't we chase down the works which influenced the project itself? Most notably, the PC-98 generation of games. Today, I wanted to discuss a few of the influences that shaped the PC-98 generation of the series we know today as the Touhou Project. Before we start, I wanted to point out a few small caveats for this video. First thing, I wanted to try and restrict myself in some way. This whole topic was a rabbit hole within itself, which I really did not have the energy to dive into in its entirety, which is why I'm sticking to the PC-98 generation. At least for now. Hence, I will be following the Touhou influences page on the Touhou wiki itself at least as much as possible, which isn't perfect by any margin, but it'll do. It's also entirely possible that some of the influences I will be talking about may not have actually been influences to the games per se, but nevertheless I felt like they were worthy of mention at the very least. Whether they were in fact influences to the games, I don't know, man, you be the judge. Okay. Now that we've cleared just about everything that I need to, I think it's time we dive right in. We start off with the beginning of the Touhou Project itself, highly responsive to prayers, released in 1997. Before the shoot-'em-ups of the modern era came the breakout-esque gameplay of highly responsive to prayers, which of course meant that the shoot-'em-up influence hadn't quite emerged throughout the series. Nevertheless, this game was still prone to its influences. While there were dozens of titles for Zun to pick from, his 2021 discussion with interview program Creative Train has him naming one title in particular, the 1986 title Kiki Kai Kai, released by Taito. And I think just briefly looking into this game, it's pretty clear to see why. Kiki Kai Kai revolves around a shrine maiden by the name of Sayo-chan, tasked to eliminate swarms of yokai from her shrine. Sounds familiar? Yeah, I really hope it does, because otherwise this is going to be a rough video for you. As you would have guessed, Sayo-chan is known to bear a striking resemblance to our very own shrine maiden, Reimu Hakure. Rather unsurprisingly, Zun appeared to get most of its influences surrounding the plot, characters, and even the name Touhou from Kiki Kai Kai itself. So believe it or not, this little game turned out to be a rather fundamental part of this project's development. Surprisingly, this wasn't the only Taito title I want to mention for highly responsive to prayers. The 1985 title, The Legend of Kage, was yet another influence upon this game, with the Makai stages 16 through 19 theme sharing a name and musical melody with this title. It's a bit more subtle since in its essence it was pretty much only a musical reference, but it's definitely something worthy of mention. Although in the musical comments for this theme, Zun makes it clear that this wasn't exactly a connection to that game, only an inspiration. Apart from those two titles, the only other notable influences to come from this title are actually just sole musical arrangements. For the Hell Stages 6 through 9 theme, Eastern Strange Discourse, it was found to be the track Raidin from the 1978 Japanese electronic band Yellow Magic Orchestra. This track alone has quite the complicated history. Zun himself states that this was one of the most important songs during the PC-98 generation, since it was one of the first ever tracks he made during the development of the first Touhou game. But despite the Touhou wiki article for this song acknowledging the clear inspiration from Raidin, Zun never actually mentioned this firsthand, interestingly. And with the second track being Yugen Magen and Mima's theme, Angel's Legend, its inspiration was found to be the track Heart of Fire from the classic 1986 game Castlevania. It's pretty cool to see influence from such a mainstream game, even though I don't think the track is very good, but whatever. And that's all the influences that seem to be found for highly responsive to prayers. It's a bit surprising, honestly. Being the first title, I was really expecting a lot more influences, but regardless, it's still a neat mix of games and artists to put into the spotlight. Next up, Story of Eastern Wonderland, also released in 1997. Being the first actual shoot 'em up to come from the series, you'd think that a major influence would come from similar titles within the genre. And as it turned out, that was exactly the case. With the seemingly countless number of titles which could have somewhat trickled down into this title's development, the Darius series of shoot-'em-ups is known to be one of the most prominent in this regard. Most notably, the fifth entry in this series, the 1994 title, Darius Gaiden, released by Taito. Really? Again? According to an interview with Shooting Gameside, a retro gaming magazine centered in Japan, games such as Darius Gaiden and Metal Black, another Taito game, were some of his favorite shoot-'em-ups, and turned out to be a pretty big influence for Zun during his development of the project as a whole. But since Story of Eastern Wonderland was the actual first shoot-'em-up in the series, it's where all the attention seems to fall. During his rather humorously self-conducted interview within Bohemian Archive and Japanese Red, the first official book for the project released in 2005, he ends up discussing a lot about not only the games which influenced him throughout his childhood, but also a lot of the major influence he received specifically from Darius Gaiden. I'm not gonna go super in-depth here, since it in itself is a rather interesting read, but as a very rough summary of the whole thing, some of the most prominent influences include more generally lengthy boss battles, emphasis on recognizable and memorable characters throughout the games, a larger emphasis on boss battles at the end of stages, the spell card system tying characters to specific attack patterns, as well as a couple of other small features he stated along with this. There's probably more you could squeeze out of this, but these were just the ones Zun specifically pointed out. Alright, that was cool, but come on, back to the list. If you couldn't already tell, Zun has brought up quite the fair share of influences when it comes to this project's development, so I think it's appropriate to bring up one of his more obscure ones. I introduce to you Hiroshi Mori, a mystery novel writer born in Japan. It's been noted that Zun has been a fan of his works and draws minor inspirations when it comes to creating his games. So how about we go upon a detailed rundown of all the notable aspects that I could find when it comes to the PC-98 generation.
There's nothing here!
Look, maybe I was just looking in the wrong place, but I've come up empty-handed on this one. Try as I might, there simply wasn't any useful information I could scour when it came to this topic. Heck, the article I showed discussing Zun's favorite creators was pretty much the only thing I found which talked about it in depth. Despite the utter lack of information surrounding this topic, I actually was able to find one in-game quote which does actually reference one of Hiroshi Mori's works. By Rumia, from Embodiments of Scarlet Devil. Bringing up this whole kerfuffle probably leaves you with a pretty reasonable question. Why even bring it up when I have nothing to say? Well, you could blame the influences list for that. Apparently, the wiki states that Story of Eastern Wonderland was influenced by Hiroshi Mori's novels through, and I quote, stage, music, or scene titles with similar yet different Japanese and English halves. How did they figure this out? I have no clue, man. There aren't even sources I can reference. As much as I truly despise how I really don't have anything else to add on to what they have to say, I think it's best to just move on. You ever happen to notice these ghostly things seen all over Story of Eastern Wonderland? Or better yet, all over the PC-98 generation itself? You're not the only one, my friend. Yeah, these things have been plaguing me ever since I kept seeing them repeatedly, but I'm here to tell you that these things actually have names. Bake Bake, and are a pretty iconic staple of the early generation of the project, even appearing in promotional posters for this game. Wait, this game had promotional posters? I never even knew that, what the fuck? But if you haven't already caught on, no, they are not in fact from Zun. So where the hell do these things come from? Huh? Yeah, I told you this game was influential to the project. As it turned out, they were based on one of the generic characters seen throughout Kiki Kai Kai. And yep, that's definitely them, alright. Oh Zun, you really wanted to make it clear what game this project came from, didn't you? Although that's pretty much the bulk when it comes to Story of Eastern Wonderland, we still have our musical influences, which, as it turned out, there was only one registered occurrence. The Stage 4 theme, Himorogi, Burn and Violet? Yeah, apparently that came from The Decisive Battle from Final Fantasy VI, released by Square in 1994. Apart from that, there really was nothing else to come from this game, so let's just move on. I'm a bit under the weather, but that's not going to stop us. Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream, once again released in 1997. Well, another Touhou entry, another game to influence it, and although he seemed to break the formula when it came to this game, with the whole competitive layout, it didn't stop Zun from finding something to fill in that gap. So what was Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream's game of choice? It was Twinkle Star Sprites, released in 1996 by ADK, only 1 year before the official release of Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream. Now, to call this game an influence on Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream is definitely an understatement. Normally you'd see maybe 1 or 2 different features as inspirations from a game, but pretty much every notable aspect of Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream is taken from Twinkle Star Sprites. Like, literally name pretty much any gameplay mechanic, and chances are it was inspired by Twinkle Star Sprites. I mean, you got the charge shots, you got the enemy spawning patterns, you got the health systems
as well. I mean, that's
you
totally
got
not
the player bombing
influencing.
system.
I mean,
You could even say they're release date for
so
games.
basically an exact copy.
It's simple, really. Apart from that, there really isn't much that I need to say. I think the similarities between these two games speaks for itself. I mean, even outside the actual gameplay mechanics, even the cover art for each of these games share a notable resemblance. Like, come on, there's no way this wasn't a clear influence. It really made me wonder why Zun appeared to get such a strong influence from this game. But as it turned out, at least from what I was aware of, there really weren't many competitive shoot 'em ups back then. So I guess it makes sense as to why I was so heavily drawn to Twinkle Star Sprites. Enough with that. What else is there to unpack? Wait, really? So, as it turned out, Twinkle Star Sprites was the only non-musical influence listed for Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream. Is that really it? There has to be something more to this. Like, this has to be wrong. You can't possibly tell me there are no other influences to catch on within this game. Surely there has to be something else that I could get to talk about. Oh. Very well. See, I told you it wasn't going to go off this easy. Despite quite literally having the references acknowledged in a few of the Touhou wiki pages, the characters Ellen and Chiuri never actually made appearances on the influences table. But that's besides the point anymore. First up, Ellen. Pretty much the entirety of Ellen is based off a character from an old Japanese manga series, which goes by the name of Atara Kimono, which roughly translates in English to the title Hard Worker. It was written by Izumi Takemoto and spanned from 1993 to 1995. Now, I'm just gonna straight up show you this. Here's Ellen from Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream, the character we all know and love, and here's the character she's based off of, Ellen Fuwa What the fuck, man? There is no convincing me that they are separate characters. They are literally the same. Still don't believe me? Well, in the manga, Ellen is a quote, fully fledged witch who quote, comes from a family of magical users. In Touhou, Ellen is quote, an eternally young witch who constantly loses her memories, pretty much condemning her to life as a child. In the manga, Ellen owns a cat by the name of Socrates. In Touhou, Ellen owns a cat by the name of Socrates. In the manga, Ellen owns the aptly named Ellen Fuwafuwa's magical shop. In Touhou, during her ending, Ellen insists on opening up her own store on the Hakurai grounds. The name? Fluffy Ellen's Magical Shop. Yeah, I wish I was joking, but this is dead serious. Anyway, let's move on to the next character, Chiuri. I was rather surprised to find out that Chiuri was based upon another Izumi Takemoto novel, this one by the name of Apple Paradise, which spanned from 1992 to 1997. Chiuri's main influence was the character Eriko Asahigaoka. It's stated that Chiuri supposedly shares the same mannerisms in terms of speech, and her infamous sailor outfit was a reference to this image of Eriko, which explains a lot, but still leaves me with an important question. Why? Ugh, I guess we'll never know. Alright, since that was pretty much all that there was to cover, I guess it's time for the musical influences. First up, Kana's theme, Vanishing Dream, Lost Dream. We have, that, released by this guy in 1993. I feel like there is absolutely no way Zun even acknowledges the existence of this song. This has to be a coincidence that they sound similar. But who am I to say? It doesn't take much for this game to surprise me. For Yumemi's theme, Strawberry Crisis, we have the track Explorer from Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei 2, released by Atlus in 1990. This is like one of the best tracks from the PC-98 generation, so major W to Zun for finding this out. Remember this game, by the way, it's gonna come up a lot later. And for the aforementioned Ellen's theme, Tabula Rasa, the empty girl, we have the song Centerfold, released by the J. Geils band in 1981? Okay, how the hell is this an influence? They don't sound similar at all, but I don't know, man. Yeah, to be fair, I was expecting this game to have more influences as well, but I guess you could blame Twinkle Star Sprites for stealing the spotlight. On to the fourth title, Lotus Land Story, released in 1998. Our return to the stage-driven story seen throughout the project ended up bringing a bunch of new features to the table, and interestingly, they come in the form of gameplay. The first one of those being the well-known grazing mechanic. You know, the reason this shit is even possible. Well, you could thank the 1996 game Raiden Fighters, released by Seibu Kaihatsu. Wait a minute. Actually, maybe Spriggan Powered, released by Naxat Soft in the same year. It wasn't clear from exactly where it emerged, but these are the top two candidates, so here they both are. Yeah, I know. Even I really thought Touhou basically invented grazing, but I guess that's not the case. To go along with grazing, however, comes another fundamental mechanic seen in the project. That mechanic is, of course, focus, otherwise simply known as slowing down the movement speed of your character. You know, the reason these games are even possible in any fucking way, as you could have probably guessed at this point. The mechanic came from a game well before Touhou, the 1995 title Donpachi, released by Cave, or Cybattler, released by Jelko in 1993. Again, fundamental part of bullet hells, hard to trace exact origin, yada yada yada, you get it, let's move on. Now, for those familiar with Lotus Land Story, did you happen to notice these checkered or red carpet backgrounds in the later stages? Or better yet, these strange dressed girls guarding the Mugen can? Also known as the Mansion of Fantasies? Of course not, why the hell would that be the thing you would notice? I didn't even know these things existed until I pointed them out. Ugh, whatever. No matter your response, you could thank ESP Raid for the influence. Released by Alice only a few months before Lotus Land Story. I did some external research on this game, and there actually was one other thing which wasn't listed on the wiki page, but still caught my attention. The similar backgrounds between the two games isn't anything special, but the girl clones seen throughout ESP Raid definitely caught me by surprise. As it turned out, these clones actually have a name. Alice clones. That's correct. Alice clones. And if that wasn't enough, there's even a playable character. Alice Master, a 15-year-old girl who appears to be clutching a doll in her official portrait. Only if Touhou had its own character named Alice affiliated with dolls, but hold on, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Along with all this, there's one more gameplay mechanic I would like to mention. The extra stage bosses Mugetsu and Gengetsu being immortal to player bombs? Yeah, that came from Chorensha 68K, released by Koichi Yoshida in 1995. I feel like that's all I really need to say about that, really. Time for music. Like Story of Eastern Wonderland, there is only one musical influence to occur. It's Marissa's theme, Vessel of Star, getting its influence from I Am a Powerful Ally from Mystic Arc, released by Enix in 1995. Again, rather easy to point out the similarities between tracks, but I am not complaining. Vessel of Star is a great track in itself. Overall, a pretty neat pile of games to influence this title. Alright, one more title left. And finally, to conclude the PC-98 series, we have Mystic Square, also released in 1998. Okay, it's the conclusion of the PC-98 era, it's the last game I have to talk about today, let's see what we got. God damn it. Well, we've gone this far, and it's a bit late to back out if I had to be honest. So without further ado, let's just finish this off. Here we go. Marissa's general bomb throughout the whole of Mystic Square, which looks a lot like the primitive version of the Master Spark, comes from McCoy's B-type ship in Dangun Feveron, released by Cave, who has a very similar looking bomb attack himself. On this topic, it's been well noted in the Touhou wiki that Marissa quote-unquote stole her Master Spark from Yuka Kazami's laser attack, which originated in Lotus Land Story. Although it is noted that Marissa's bomb was technically influenced by Dangun Feveron. I really don't want to believe it, since Marissa stealing a literal attack and calling it her signature move is the most Marissa thing I've ever heard of. In Stage 1, the whole idea behind the entrance to Makai comes from the aforementioned Shin Megami Tensei 2 and the entrance to the Abyss in that game. I really hope you remember that name, I told you it was going to be coming up again. During the Stage 2 boss fight, The stage boss demon Luis's first bullet pattern comes from the aforementioned Darius Gaiden Zone's L and N boss, Double Dealer, and one of its very own bullet patterns. The previously discussed, because I got ahead of myself, Stage 3 boss Alice Murgatroyd's design and character title, Witch of Death, was influenced by the first Shin Megami Tensei game, released by Atlus, and its own character named Alice, with a strikingly similar design to our very own Alice seen in the Touhou Project. And in the previously mentioned sequel, Shin Megami Tensei 2, can even be found holding a pair of dolls in her character portrait. Okay, what is up with Alice, man? First ESP raid, then Shin Megami Tensei? Like, what's next? Alice in Wonderland? Okay. In various stages throughout Mystic Square, but primarily during the Stage 4 boss fight between Yuki and Mai, the homing missiles they use throughout the fight most prominently appear within the game Ray Force, released by Taito, where the player craft launches homing missiles to lock onto and destroy enemies. Stages 5 and 6 bring us quite a few different influences to talk about. Yumiko's design, Shinki's wings, and the Stage 5 and 6 backgrounds were all inspired by various features within Shin Megami Tensei 2, yet again. The character Hanon was cited to be the base design behind pretty much the entirety of Yumiko. The character Lucifer was cited to be the base design behind Shinki's set of wings, and various cutscenes and backgrounds throughout the game are cited to be the influence behind the design of many background elements within Mystic Square, such as Shinki's castle seen throughout these stages, also known as Pandemonium. Most prominently, a lot of the influence came from the Keither Castle within Shin Megami Tensei 2. Shinki's general design comes from the previously mentioned ESP raid and its final boss, who apparently goes by the name Miss Gara, but there was a shockingly little amount of information about this, so I really don't know any more than that if I had to be honest. On this topic, the first bullet pattern during Shinki's White Wing phase has also been cited to be from one of Miss Gara's very own bullet patterns during her fight. And finally, Alice's boss fight within the extra stage of this game also sees some inspiration in the form of her bullet patterns, with a few of her patterns coming from games such as G-Darius within the previously mentioned Darius series, as well as Dodonpachi, released by Cave. A lot of her patterns have been speculated to be inspired from many of the attacks within these games. God damn, Zun really seemed to get his hands dirty when it came to influences this time around. But to close this off, we've got 3 final musical influences to touch upon. First is the Stage 4 theme from Mystic Square, Maplewise, with its influence coming from the track The Final Decisive Battle from Rise of the Sinistrals, an entry in the Lufia series of RPG games developed by Neverland. I've stated my feelings about Maplewise in a previous video, but in short, it's one of my favorites from Mystic Square, so it's interesting to know where it came from. Next up is the Stage 5 theme, The Last Judgment, getting its influence from Original Sin from the second game in the Game Boy Castlevania series, Belmont's Revenge. It sounds fine, I guess. Not much else I need to add on. And finally, the Stage 5 boss Yumiko's theme, Doll of Misery, got its influence from the track Jutavo from the Japanese gothic rock band Malice Miser. Is this really an influence? I mean, they sound ridiculously similar. And Zin kinda incentivizes the idea that he created this on his own, at least according to his musical comments for Doll of Misery, but I don't know. But even if that were the case, it really goes to show how Zin was able to elevate the track and produce, in my opinion, one of the best tracks from Mystic Square. Way to go, man. Way to go. I don't know what the hell Zin was on when it came to this title and its influences, but it pays a nice homage to the titles which brought this project to life. A nice list of titles, if I had to say so myself. And there it is. That's your basic rundown of the media which influenced the PC-98 generation of the Touhou Project. Is this all that this generation has to uncover? I don't think so. Looking back, there were plenty of leads which were left unanswered. But as I said, digging ourselves towards the origin of this whole scenario is a complete rabbit hole in itself. And although it's definitely possible that there is a lot more to uncover when it comes to the PC-98 generation, I think we're gonna have to bring that up some other time. Thank you, everyone, for watching.